Okay, this video is from chapter 35. It's going to be 35F, and it's from the same book, The Medical Reformation, by me, Pete Rogers. And we just left off last time talking about iron metabolism, and the gist of it was that men become iron overloaded once they stop growing in Western societies because they fortify the food with iron and they eat a lot of meat. Women become iron overloaded after they hit menopause because they stop menstruating. Okay, and then the iron, once it becomes overloaded, you start leaking more iron into the blood, developing increased amounts of free iron. You'll have higher serum ferritin, and you get more ferrous redox cycling between Fe2 plus Fe3 plus, generating lots of reactive oxygen species, a lot more oxidative stress. Okay, so we talked about that last lecture. Now we're going to move on to the next topic. All right, so now I want to briefly talk about mitochondrial toxins. And the reason for this is that there's a lot of theories about life. You know, one of them I've talked about recently is how some people, these immunology experts, say you really start aging rapidly once your immune system is becoming dysfunctional. And accelerated dysfunction of the immune system due to, let's say, mitochondrial toxicity accelerates aging. All right? And, you know, guys like O'Neill, these are great famous immunology research. O'Neill, Maria Middlebrun, Lydia Lynch. They're really going to talk a lot about the connection between metabolism and immune function. And I see it all the time because I look at tons of neck CTs and MRIs, and I see the lymph nodes shrinking as people get older. As they shrink and their immune system atrophies, they're less able to fight off cancer and infections. Okay, so the reason I'm going through all this is I'm trying to tell you this stuff about mitochondria is super important. Why do people get diabetes? Because they inhibit their mitochondria, especially with fat. And then their whole metabolism backs up from the electron transport in the mitochondria to the Krebs cycle in the mitochondrial matrix to glycolysis in the cytoplasm. That's important to know. Then what are the theories of aging? There's a mitochondrial theory of aging. You know, there's oxidative stress theories of aging. These all tie back into the mitochondria. Okay, so, and then my own theory of neurovascular uncoupling in the brain for neurodegeneration. Why does it happen? One of the main reasons is because the mitochondria are dysfunctional, unable to generate enough ATP to pump the calcium out of the cytoplasm, so the cell gets overactivated, overstimulated, and it goes into excitotoxicity when its metabolic demands are too high relative to its oxygen and glucose delivery and its ATP production. Okay, and I tell you that because this is really important. Like I said, I have a really smart internal medicine friend, and he says to me, Pete, you figured all this stuff out. You figured out why all these people are sick and dying. He goes, what a joke. Nobody ever talks about this in conventional medicine. Nobody knows it. He says, this guy works at a bunch of different hospitals. He doesn't work at a bunch. He works at like 3 or 4. And he says, there's not a single doctor at any of these 3 or 4 hospitals that knows any of this stuff except for you, which meaning me. And it's easy to learn. They're just not taught in med school or residency. It's not in any of their books, so it's not on their boards exams, and so they don't learn it. And most doctors are functional illiterates. They don't read after they finish their residencies and fellowships because they're too busy being overworked. They then want to spend time with their family or their hobby. They're sleep deprived. They got to spend some time with their kids. And so after you've done all that, and CME is really a fake, so after you've done all that, there's not a lot of time for reading. Okay, and I told you, I knew that mitochondrial toxicity was a major issue because I'd come across that in my papers, my reading about biochemistry, like the Brownlee papers on diabetes and other papers I was reading about neurodegeneration. So I went back to all my biochem books. I own about 7 of them, and there's nothing on mitochondrial toxicity. I'm like, this is insane. So I start going through all the medical literature, and I very quickly found over 50 of them. Okay, and here's just a couple of them. So fat, especially saturated fat, inhibits complex 3 of the inner mitochondrial membrane. So inside the mitochondria, you've got this inner mitochondrial membrane. It's a location for electron transport. Complexes 1, 2, 3, and 4 pass electrons down from one carrier to the next one and progressively towards oxygen because oxygen has the strongest grip for the electrons out of all these carriers. And it's like a fireman bucket brigade. And simultaneously, that's coupled to pumping a proton into what's called intermembranous space between this inner mitochondrial membrane and there's another membrane that's not even on this drawing, but that's the outer mitochondrial membrane. And that space in between them is the intermembranous space. And you build up this gradient of protons, a real high gradient, like negative 165 millivolts. And when that gradient gets too high, you can no longer pump against it, and electron transport will back up. So Sat fat is thought to be the worst of the fats in terms of causing insulin resistance because you generate an extra electron carrier during the process of beta oxidation when you burn fats on the sat fats compared to ones that have double bonds in them, the MUFAs, PUFAs, and whatnot. Other things that will inhibit mitochondrial electron transport. How about F minus? That's what they put in tap water in almost all the cities. Stupid, okay? It causes brain damage. It lowers IQ. It makes people docile. Well, gee, maybe that's why they put it in there, to make people stupid and docile. Okay, but anyways, it's a mitochondria inhibitor. Lead. If lead was sometimes used to be used for plumbing, that also is a mitochondria inhibitor. You eat omega-6 oils, you get hydroxynonenal. It's a toxic aldehyde byproduct of lipid peroxidation from omega-6 cooking oils. That ties in with the Tetsumori Yamashima theory of, neurodegeneration, all the Japanese people. But anyways, omega-6 cooking oils are bad for your health. You don't want to be cooking anything or eating anything fried. Mitochondria inhibitors. Atrazine, it's the stuff sprayed on all the GMO corn. It's a mitochondria inhibitor, not to mention it's a feminizer. Very, very estrogenic, turns the male frogs into female frogs. Cadmium, which is on, brake pads, it's in some non-organic food too. That's a mitochondria inhibitor. GP, the stuff they spray on the non-organic soy, that is a mitochondria inhibitor. So you see, they're common. HG, which is often a contaminant in high fructose corn syrup. They used to advertise high fructose corn syrup as a preservative. And the reason it's a preservative is because of the HG that's in there, okay? You know what that is, right? So it's almost funny if it wasn't so sad. So yeah, it's not a joke. The subsidized foodstuffs that are in your water and your food inhibit your mitochondria, making you stupid, aging you faster, decreasing your energy, making you into more of a weak, fat, sick chump. Okay, TCE, trichloroethylene, that's used in dry clean. That's why I don't go to dry clean anymore. I get teased sometimes. Oh, my shirts are wrinkled. My hospital lab coat's wrinkled. I could give a rat's tail, okay, When you're 30 years old, you're looking for a wife, you want to be all sharp and perfect. When you're an old man like me, 60 years old, I really don't care. I just have to look well enough to be professional, Anyways, it's kind of like the old joke about the younger the doctor, the more available they are by beeper. The older the doctors are, the less they care about dressing nice and the less they want to be paid. Page the intern, don't bug me. All right, well, anyways, let's go to the next slide here. Oh, like I said, too, I've made other videos about mitochondria inhibitors. I made a newsletter about mitochondria inhibitors. We just went through a bunch of them, but now I'm going to show you another slide of them. I kept on finding more and more of them. And the reason this matters is, think about it. What's the Warburg effect? Well, Otto Warburg, German biochemist, won the Nobel Prize in 1931. If you make a cell hypoxic and that injures the mitochondria, the cell will sometimes revert to a primitive pathway of running on anaerobic metabolism, becoming like an anaerobic bacteria. And so hypoxia of 35% or more was enough to make the cells die or transform into cancer. So what's my point? Well, gee, what if you only had 20% hypoxia, which you can often get from just eating a high-fat diet with salt and causing vasoconstriction, and the oxygen, the high-fat clumping the red blood cells together, overcoming the zeta potential, dropping the oxygen delivery to the tissues. So once you've done that, then you throw in a couple mitochondria inhibitors to screw up the mitochondria. Perhaps you can initiate a cancer with only 20% of hypoxia, maybe 25% hypoxia. You see where this is going? You're nickel and diming the mitochondria with a bunch of different things. And now here's some more of the common things. Okay, you listen to all these idiots, these clowns telling everybody they should be on statins. Statins are a mitochondria inhibitor, inhibiting at the level of coenzyme Q. And then all these genius psychiatrists putting patients on SSRIs, selective serotonin reuptake inhibitors. Well, guess what? Many of those are mitochondria inhibitors, most of them, okay? Trazodone, for example. They're not only mitochondria inhibitors, some of them at the level of ATP synthase, some of them at the level of complex 1. You see how you're nickel and diming, you're beating the crap out of your mitochondria. Where's your energy going to come from? No wonder all these people are fat, weak, and slow. Okay, so what I'm saying is it goes on and on. Furosemide, Lasix, a common diuretic for hypertensive patients, mitochondria inhibitor, complex 1. Haldol, antipsychotic, mitochondrial inhibitor. NPTP, the thing that causes Parkinson's disease, mitochondrial inhibitor, okay? A lot of this Parkinson's disease is damage to the mitochondria, and you damage those neurons in the substantia nigra, man, you want to protect them. You lose more than 70% of them and your Parkinson's symptoms. So you want to preserve what you got. Okay, there's a whole bunch of other ones that are common. Real common thing is antifungals. Processed food has to have a long shelf life, so it doesn't get returned to the company. It'll eventually get sold. It'll sit there on the shelf for a year, 2 years, 3 years. So they don't want to get in return, so they'll put tons of antifungals in there, anti-mold inhibitors. If mold grows in the food, it gets returned to them. What I'm saying is those mold inhibitors, quite often, they're mitochondria inhibitors. So when you eat that junk, that processed food, you're inhibiting your mitochondria. Stupid. Okay, a lot of food dyes they put in processed food, and the stuff that's fed to children a lot of times, almost candy-like. M&M's is a perfect example. These food dyes, a lot of them are mitochondria inhibitors. Okay, so you see, it's really not that much of a mystery why so many people are so stupid. BPA, bisphenol A, the estrogenic used in hard plastics, mitochondria inhibitor. And you can bet, a lot of the other estrogenics are. I told you about, I think it was Seralini, Gil Seralini. He wrote the paper on estrogenic chemicals, and he said you shouldn't just call them estrogenic chemicals because the same chemicals, 80% of them are toxic to the brain. So you should call them estrogenic neurotoxic chemicals. Guess what? They also tend to be a little bit toxic to the immune system. Estrogenic, neurotoxic, immunotoxic things. They also tend to be prothrombotic, increase the tendency to clotting. Estrogenic, immunotoxic, neurotoxic, prothrombotic, endocrine disrupting chemicals. So, all this stuff is crap. Let's see, what else? Aminoglycoside antibiotics, fluoroquinolone antibiotics, the beta-lactam antibiotics, the anti-epilepsy drugs, valproic acid, for example. There's other common things that will inhibit the Krebs cycle, which will have a similar effect. Alcohol does it. Alcohol is stupid. You shouldn't drink any alcohol. Arsenic can do it to some extent. Pyruvate dehydrogenase inhibition, alpha-ketoglutarate dehydrogenase inhibition. Traumatic brain injury will damage pyruvate dehydrogenase enzyme. Silver will also inhibit malate dehydrogenase enzyme. Let's see, what else is common here? Tylenol is a mitochondrial inhibitor. Flame retardants, that's like why I don't wear a blue surgical gown unless I have to. Like if I'm doing a routine biopsy, I don't need to wear a blue surgical gown. They have blue surgical gowns in the operating room because of the potential of working with cautery, and they've got the bromine flame retardants on them. Those bromine flame retardants, mitochondria inhibitors. Okay. Let's see. There's a bunch more of them that are common. You get my point. Welding, if you get manganese exposure, liquid paper's got trichloroethylene, the same stuff for the dry cleaners. It's also a degreasing agent. Propofol, a common sedative, drug. Anyways, I think you get the point. There's a lot of them. Okay. So also, like when I take B12, I only take methylcobalamin. I would never take cyanocobalamin. That stuff can add up. I don't trust it. I know some people think it's okay. I don't think so. Not unless I had no other choice. I wouldn't take that crap. All right. So, anyways, that's the scoop on mitochondrial inhibitors. And I think the most important point to get out of all this is that mitochondrial inhibition and damage can cause cancer. All right. So if you're trying to heal a cancer, you wouldn't want to be doing this intentionally. And you don't want to make a habit out of it. And just the routine hypoxia that occurs from eating a high-fat, high-sodium meal, is in the ballpark 15 to 20%. And you really want to be ramping that up so it potentially gets to 35% and you get the Warburg effect? No, stupid. Now you know, so stop doing it. Okay, next question here. Why is it so hard to learn nutrition? And it's easy to learn what to eat. Eat starches, fruits, and veggies. Take a B12. Okay, that's all you got to know. Preferably organic. That's all you got to know. And don't eat anything else. But the reason it's hard is you have to unlearn all the other stuff. And most people have social thinking brains. They don't have what I would call a logical brain. And so it's just hard for them emotionally. Oh, I want to enjoy life. I want to enjoy life. You want to just enjoy life by being fat, sick, and stupid like most people? I wouldn't find that enjoyable. I like having a brain. I like using my brain. I like not being a pathetic, weak chump and stupid like so many people. I'm sorry to say it, but every doctor knows this. Stupid people are sick way more often than smart people. Smart people are the kind that are watching my videos and other internet, nutrition and health channels. They're learning something. They're trying to help themselves, but they're not the typical patient. The typical patient is sort of a clueless, sad, pathetic individual. I feel sorry for them, but most of them have zero chance of ever getting better because they're not willing to learn and change their habits. And tons of them are saying all kinds of stupid things. I'd rather die than stop eating meat. The only thing I enjoy in life is ice cream, and you want to take it away. All this stupid stuff. Okay, and also most of the internet so-called experts are a bunch of phonies. Okay, like I said, most of them recommend the Mediterranean diet. I call it the Antichrist diet because it promises salvation but doesn't deliver. And look at all the guys who got sponsors. All the guys who got sponsors, almost all of them, they're promoting olive oil or omega-3s or soy. Okay, I don't promote any of that crap. My goal is not to be the most popular. I'll never be the most popular. The truth is not popular. But I think I can be the best doctor in the world. That's what I'm trying to do, okay? And you'll see that. I gave you a list, if you saw the video about a week ago, of how do you compare the doctors. And that'll tell you how you can see who's recommending what. And you'll be able to tell who's who. And you'll see most of the ones that are real popular and have sponsors, they're selling stuff. They're promoting popular commercial foods. That's why they've got sponsors. That's why the algorithm promotes their videos and stuff. Whereas, somebody like me, like Plato said, no one is more hated than he who tells the truth, okay? Let's see, what else? Okay, we've talked about that stuff quite a bit. Okay, here's the simple pyramid. It's real easy. The Spartan vegan diet, okay? Basically, eat starches. We've talked about starches are great food, like the best food. Fruits are also fantastic food. Eat fruits. Eat some veggies, take a B12. That's all you got to do, know for nutrition. That's pretty simple. And what I tell people is you don't have to commit lifelong when you start out. Just do it for a month. Do it for a month. Check your cholesterol before, check your blood pressure before, and then see what it is after a month. And lots of people, they lose weight, they feel better, they're willing to try it for another month. And then they start getting used to it once they've learned how to do it. And they'll stay that way for life. Okay, so that's it. And then the other stuff is the lifestyle stuff. We talked about that a lot already. Just like people who practice religion, they're way healthier, okay? The reason why religion's frowned upon right now is because that's a whole political issue, but basically religious people are harder to enslave. The goal right now in all the Western countries is to enslave the population. So they don't want them to be religious because religious people, they have this other viewpoint, and that's why that's not popular. But, to me, meditation's kind of a joke, okay? Yeah, if you want to sit in a corner and say Om, go ahead. But I studied all the great geniuses of the world that I could, and the fantastic artists, sculptors, and stuff. I never saw a single one that said meditation helped me become a better athlete or helped me become a genius. I just never seen it, okay? So, yeah, it can make you a nice person. Go ahead and do it. I don't think it's that bad. I've heard some bad things about it, but all I'm saying is, religion's tried and true thing. It works. All the major religions inspire people to higher achievement, okay? And I especially like Christianity, of course, for reasons I've talked about in other lectures. Okay, get your sleep every night. At least like in the ballpark. You'll know what works for you. When I was young, I could get away with 6 hours. Now I tend to like 7 hours to be optimal function the next day. Exercise does lots of good things. Okay, so we covered a lot of that. Oh, here I call this the tree of good and evil. So basically, if you eat the stuff from the tree of good, you'll get all the benefits, skinny and healthy. If you eat from the fat chump side of the tree, you'll be fat and sick. Even if you're a nice person, you get fat and sick. Okay, so here's a couple quotes from the Bible. Genesis 1:1. In the beginning, God created the heaven and the earth. Genesis 1:3. And God said, let there be light, and there was light. And then Genesis 1:4. And God saw the light and that it was good, and God divided the light from the darkness. And the Lord God planted a garden eastward in Eden, and there he put man whom he had formed. So God created man in his own image. In the image of God, he created him. Male and female created he them. Okay, so before the flood, actually it's Genesis 1:29, we're supposed to eat only plant foods. After the flood, the plant foods were wiped out so people could eat animal foods. They were supposed to go back to eating plant foods, but we're not going to get into all that right now. I'll just tell you a little bit of stuff about it. So here's Genesis 1:29. Then God said, behold, I have given you every plant yielding seed, which is upon the face of all the earth, and every tree which has fruit, it shall be food for you. And to every beast of the earth, and every bird of the air, and every creature that crawls upon the earth, I have given every green plant for food. So originally all animals ate plants, according to the Bible. All right, here's a line from Exodus. And God said, if thou wilt hearken to the voice of the Lord thy God, and wilt give ear to his commandments, I will put none of these diseases upon thee, which I have brought upon the Egyptians. In our case, instead of saying Egyptians, we'll say low-carb paleos. For I am the Lord God who heals you. For I am the Lord God who heals you. Exodus chapter 15, verse 26. So there it is, a promise from God. If you eat the vegan diet, you're going to be a lot healthier than all the paleos. Okay, what more could you want? So, anyways, we'll call it a night for tonight with just that. Hope that was helpful. All the way, one last thing too. In the book of Daniel, Daniel's men, when they were in captivity in Babylon, they tried to feed them meat, and Daniel said, "No, my men will eat plants, and you just watch. Compare my men eating only plants for 10 days to your men." And I think it was King Nebuchadnezzar, and the guys, his men, Daniel and his guys, only eating plants the next days, were all fitter and healthier, had a more vigorous, healthy-looking countenance, probably more blood supply. Their skin has that look of vitality compared to all the fat, meat-eating people. So I know that it makes a difference. In my family, I got a lot of meat eaters, a little fat, and they're always too hot, and they always want the air conditioning on. I think air conditioning makes people stupid. I don't like air conditioning. I almost never use it. But in my house, I often have to wear sweatshirts and sweat jackets because all the fat meat eaters want the temperature about 5 or 10 degrees colder than I do. So that's one of the downsides of being a vegan. You're healthier than the rest of your family, so they kind of annoy you about things. Anyways, hope that was helpful.